Yeah, I want to do a quick. I was talking to a 611, answering his AT&T on a mobile phone, the Apple iPhone 6S. And it's kind of like a. It seemed to be like a thing of the way the phone is. I mean, I never really even seen or heard of Apple iPhone 6 or 6S in the way of its history. I mean, I wasn't around or in need really of a phone, and how far back the iPhone actually dates back. I mean, I am not sure at all, but I mean, it looks like it would like be a chronological assumption, and really at the same time, it doesn't look that way at all because the Apple iPhone 6S. I mean, it seems to be like the real big deal about the year of 2020. And because as a matter of fact, the software engineering of the touchscreen, I mean, it looks like almost virtually identical to the Apple iPhone SE, and that is like the big deal about the year 2020. Yeah, and there was something about that 6-year thing, and like a PhD is like a 6-year degree, and there's like a lot of information like I've really been looking at for like years, and just thinking about really I'm going on my memory about, I mean, a huge amount, instead of just looking for it, because there'd been a time of like looking for a lot of information, and realizing like where the availability led to as compared to the actual content, like the real deal, and not going for and read and put a lot of time into like searching for like information, and to discover it's like, oh, you got to be kidding me thing after like 2 or 3 weeks of like really getting into it, and then just to discover that. Well, anyway, so that's kind of like the thing about my thing about why I'm just basically going on my memory for a lot of reasons, because looking and searching for a lot of information that was available that really wasn't a question about its like true authenticity or its original real academic thing about it, not a deviation or version. According, but anyway, noticing the difference was really the thing, about me personally. But anyway, yeah, so I kind of just like quit looking and just like was seriously just going on my memory. So that's what the deal is right now. But anyway, the thing about the Apple iPhone SE seems to like be, like the thing about, perfect 10/10 vision ultimately, in a way of like 2020, the year 2020, because I mean, at the same time, it seems to be like a language issue, or what that is in African American linguistics that way. And that's my thing about the deal about the Apple iPhone 6S, because there had been a lot of factors going through a circuit that seemed to be like the 6-year difference between 1995 and the year 2001, like, of like the World Trade Center, and I mean all that, and it was just like something about the software engineering involving the Apple iPhone SE on an Apple iPhone 6S. I mean, I never heard of an Apple iPhone 6S or 6 anything. I'm really not sure what the first Apple iPhone that I actually became aware of, like way back when they first started coming out. But as far as I know, it wasn't a 6S at all that I'm aware of. And I mean, if that's really all it needs to mean, or what geographic options or manufactured geographic options is in a specific area, well then that's the impression I have about it. But anyway, yeah, so the thing about that had ultimately led to like the Barbara Walters and Hugh Downs thing of 2020, and years later Barbara Walters on the television talk show The View. It seemed to be like a memory of a thing of like 1965. But my thing about the phone, Apple iPhone 6S, is ultimately getting to a considerable amount of what current resident is to the 100 Club in a way of some African American. I'm just really kind of like doing a quick reference. But the thing about the 6S, it seemed to be like a real big deal about the 6-year period, or certain forms of entertainment along the way, maybe identifying the direction that would imply that in a way of just like an African American way. But anyway, it's kind of like the PhD. It's like the demanded like minimum of like a 6-year degree of specializing, in all the chemistry of the medical and chemistry makeup that would be considered, the specialization in the direction, not limited to the medical. But the thing with this is that, I mean, it really, I think, I'm not sure if the PhD degree is limited to only medical, but as far as like, I would assume that would be in a more productive manner that way. not necessarily a tolerance or the accuracy, in that way. But yeah, so I mean, it seems to be ultimately, getting to whether or not if that would even include something in my mind that seems to be like really, something about memory minus de facto being like 35 and awesome powers, blue bonnet, imperial eagle in that way. But my thing about, the thing about the World Trade Center 9/11. I was like going through a circuit and like a lot was really happening during like 1994, 95, and 96, okay? And, it's kind of like, I never heard anything about it until like the year 2001, okay? But the thing with this is that after like thinking about so much that was going on and how I was seeing and hearing what I was seeing and hearing on television at the time in 2001, I mean, 9/11 is automatically like the emergency and the alphanumerics of 95, okay? Then 911, I mean, happening in the year 2001 didn't quite compute. Unless, there was like, it seemed to be like there were like maybe identical locations in various different places in that way. But anyway, it's kind of like automatically, it's kind of like convincing me, that the World Trade Center was in 2001 isn't real easy to do, although that was when I actually found out. And it seemed to be like something in a way of like Barbara Walters and Hugh Downs. And what Howard Hughes and oil in the Houston area, Houston, Texas area, what Hughes is to oil, Howard Hughes, or, a color code and night vision that way. And I've been like really getting into the analytical stuff of linguistics and geographics and bibliography, terminology, different degrees, and circuit, out of circuit, and a lot of factors, And it's kind of like it has led to like where it's really at right now because of the thing is kind of like it really became to my awareness that the memory was like the real big deal about not realizing that it was the big deal, about it. And it seems to be like, the expertise of the military, like we're really already knowing that way. And it looks so, I mean, like, how many times is like the 200-year celebration of America, really happened? I mean, after studying and looking at all the alphanumerics, seeing huge building, high-rise build tore down, I mean, like all that's kind of like, you got to be kidding me. It's almost like a 400 or 500 year period. It's kind of like, God, how many times did the 200-year celebration of America really happen? How old is English really to begin with, really? And it's kind of like it had got to that point to where I was like, I studied it so much and got to the point that it would have to be, a minimum of 400 to maybe even 500 years consistently. But the thing about the memory minus the fact that it seemed to be like the real big deal of whether if a memory was like a factor of only time will reactivate, and maybe what might not have significance or trauma in a way that would maybe reflect a time duration that really, I mean, the way I see it, it seems to be like a perfected thing of like military, already knowing like all that. But anyway, yeah. So it seems to be like a 35-year period of something, if there's a tolerance there, but really something about what I've been looking at and studying, and some things that were like really going on. It's kind of like, I'm going on my memory, so like, I'm still like going over a whole lot of information that way in my mind, just based upon what I was like looking at going through the circuit before, during, and after, and what it meant, okay? But anyway, so it seemed to be like the big deal about, the World Trade Center being like a 2001, a Hughes, a Gatesville thing, okay? And what that is to like 36 and Chase and oil and night vision in a way of like, Abraham Lincoln being like, the thing about the president studying in the dark in that way. Or what night vision is in that way to color code of oil, or the Deep Star 6 movie about below sea level in the depths that way, and even ultimately getting to the Star of David and the code blue thing about the 6-point star in that way of like a litigation not necessarily being de facto, although it seems to be like a big deal about memory minus de facto equating to like 35, NASA and Audi and Dodge and something about, Dodge itself, using the double / in that way, and what RAM or ROM is, RAM or ROM, or AOL that way with like RAM, random access memory, or read-only memory, in a way of the A and the O. And the AOL, America Online, the acronym, it seems to be like, and it's not really limited to that. It seems to be like even something involving, in my mind, of like procedures of I wouldn't necessarily call it the heartbeat of America, but I mean, it seems to be ultimately getting to like a pericardium and certain procedures involving what would be, in a way of what an oblation would be based upon pronunciation between the O and the A, oblation and ablation, and something about Pearland being 71, an act of God, or like oblation and ablation. One of them so I have to actually remember, but according to the procedure of the heart, the cutting of the tissue and controlling what would be considered a fibrillation or atrial fibrillation or arrhythmia in a way it would be controlled with the procedure, okay? But one of them, and I'm trying to remember if it's the A or the O of oblation or ablation, but it's like an act of God, okay? The way it's defined in that way. And the pericardium, ultimately, the way the procedures in chronological order, I mean, it all happened in it once. I mean, it ultimately had gotten to, pericardium and the procedure of cutting the lining and fluid, supposedly a bag around the heart that I was like never even aware of, like was even a reality. But it seemed to be like ultimately it's like the way it's described and defined, according to my experience, it kind of was like leading the impression, giving the impression of one way, but yet it gave the impression that like 3 layers of tissue was needed, to create the bag around the heart. But it ultimately seems to be like, in reality, like the lungs, it almost seemed like in combination of like 3 different procedures, ultimately getting, if they were all combined at once, like a heart transplant. It's kind of like, you got to be freaking kidding me for real, And I was looking at that and what that A and O is to like RAM and ROM, or HTTP://, okay, or the humor about the Clash of the Titans. And the thing about the World Trade Center being shown at a location that seemed to be referring to night vision in a way of like what Barbara Walters and Hugh Downs would represent in the way of what what oil is, and in many ways and what that is in military time. And I was like looking at that AOL and the Heartbeat of America thing and the alphanumeric linguistics that way. Even attenuation and the attention with the U and the A being like a 21 and 1 being 22, and something about the FDIC, the car, and the RCA thing, Radio Corporation of America, and the list goes on and on. And ultimately it had gotten to a combination of things. But anyway, it's kind of like back to the pericardium, reflecting that fluid building up would actually have to have the necessity of cutting the tissue to let the fluid dissipate. What would normally be symptoms of like mesothelioma. Okay, so it's like a combination of a restriction in blood flow, or what would be normally the transfer of oxygen through the tissue of the lungs into the bloodstream, like a normal everyday every breath taken of a transfer. Mesothelioma presents the issue that might present a restriction in the bronchial and the lungs that would be similar based upon practical application of even the blood vessels that would show something that would present the restriction in the form of like maybe what high cholesterol would represent as plaque. Even digestive, all the information that had been given about digestion and all that, I'm almost to the point that even high cholesterol and plaque build up in the intestines. I mean, I've come to the realization that some information, really should have already been a known fact about certain, anatomy factors of like, the reproductive glands, the hormones, and how the pituitary gland affects, a male person in that way of like circulation, and likewise in addition, like urology, as well as other factors. It's kind of like, hey, that's like one of the first things they should have automatically, like, them not knowing is a bunch, of serious crap, okay? The thing with this is that really, when I was realizing a lot about that, not limited to, there was like other factors that was like going through, the system of that and involving, arrhythmia and fibrillation in that way that was presented the issue of a procedure of an ablation. And ultimately it's kind of like I'm looking at all this, and it's like while I'm studying it and doing a lot on my memory, it's like I'm still like actually using a little bit of the memory. It's kind of like you got to be kidding me, man. But anyway, it's kind of like the fibrillation and the arrhythmia would be a representative, of a congestive through the effectiveness of the definition or implication, whether any practical application based upon, when and where it is used or applied, or one separately or individually or a combination, that would present maybe a whole different perception of the entire situation. It's kind of like I was going through that, and an ablation was like recommended for congested, because so like going through the hospital repeatedly, like once a pretty much like right at once a month. It was like really making me a little upset because it looked like it was like a schedule that really I wasn't in control of, but it was like very much, I mean, how could it not be so controlled that you really, I mean, only probably idiot after the fourth or fifth month, and the same deal being with admitting diagnosis. I mean, you got to be kidding me. I mean, so anyway, so ultimately it got to that, and and anyway, so I kind of like and I was like looking at all the information of mesothelioma, oh god, amyloidosis, and how true it is about the terminology. I'm really not sure, and I'm not trying to find humor in that. I mean, at all, and that's ridiculously not funny. But anyway, and the thing of it is that the deal about the immune system, okay, or how bone marrow is affected in a way to trigger what would be not the hemoglobin, the globulin. And I want to say hemoglobin, but in any case, yeah, the globulin that would present the antigen, and combining whether or not if the immune system itself with its own, according to the information I was looking at, okay, it was like presenting the issue of like the globulin. I'm not sure if I can even include the hemoglobin, but anyway. The globulin about the immunoglobulin, yeah. But anyway, yeah. So anyway, it seemed to be like whether or not if the information was going to stay involving the antigen that would represent the immune system itself kicking in with its own mechanism of producing white blood cells. But the thing of it is the bone marrow being a factor of the bone marrow being affected, and in turn then affecting the immune system, I think it's the immunoglobulin, and the antigen that would be identified. And whether or not if the antigen is identifying only if the bone marrow is the cause of the immune system kicking in and reacting, producing an overabundant amount of white blood cells. I was going through the information, it's kind of like I was having a little bit of an issue, I don't want to call it a conflict of interest or a conflict of the information or aversion. It's like we're very frustrating. I mean that way really already, but it shouldn't be, and that's what I'm not thrilled about. But anyway, yes, it seemed to be like the real big deal about that. And if the immune system was actually being producing an overabundant amount of white cells, creating a restriction in the blood flow itself, or a combination of like factors that would also include a fluid buildup based upon that alone, a restriction in blood flow that actually, did not allow the bloodstream to absorb or evaporate or, dissipate and allow transfer, through penetration or absorption, and what would represent maybe condensation of, a difference of temperature of, humidity and condensation in a way of just a normal temperature change that would present that awareness that way, that would represent maybe even evaporation that way, what would be like the transfer of oxygen through the lungs. If it's a practical application identifying, that in a way, by comparison, well, there is. But anyway, but not the same at all, but, that way. So anyway, so like going all that information was about the pericardium and the immune system in a way of amyloidosis, and ultimately, it led to a lot of factors that really I'm really not trying to be involved with. I mean, like really at all. But yeah, it seems like I felt the need to have a need at least a level of communication that would not be a doctor's immediate assumption of, even communicating, or even a lot of patients might be concerned, and but sometimes many people in the emergency room or in a hospital are not really prepared, or even plan the need. But to me it's almost like common sense, because anything I'm involved with, I like really knowing about it. It's not like I'm trying to direct my attention that way, but it seems to be a lot about my interest, and just my own demanded standard for myself of just like knowing, because it got to the point that I felt the need more so the need than just like the interest, and that's my point. But anyway, yeah. So like back to the Apple iPhone 6s is where I was going really ultimately about the 6, and what that is to what is that, the 48 thing of, it's what, 28? It's the 52 thing, right? The 6 spelled out alphanumerically. What's that, 52? What, 28, 48, 49? Yes, 52. it's like the hard thing, you know, the Apple iPhone 6s, it seemed to be like, you know, how the heartbeat of America, you know, what the beat really means to like arrhythmia, or you know what German is to the Pentagon, you know, I mean for real, or you know, or what the you know computer literacy means, you know, notice the similarities in tempo and notation, kind of like you know thing about it, right? So anyway, or sequencing characterization and sets forward what sequencing really is, and timekeeping and audio production as compared to you know computer programming, in that way, or you know what sequencing is and is not, of you know going a little bit beyond in a progressive manner as compared to you know probably the most advanced you know standards of anything that would even represent beyond the parameters, and a whole different science and you know level of experience. Yeah. So anyway, that's my thing about you know some of the information is like the Apple iPhone 6s. It looks like a 6-year period between like what would be my assumption automatically 9/11. Back then, you know, a lot was going on going through the circuit, but yet at the same time it's got like 911. So automatically the emergency like alphanumerically 95. In any case, so it's kind of like you know it's kind of like thinking about that with the exponential quotients in the slide of like you know the power on power off with like you know Apple iPhone. And what the thing is about binary numbers and I-10 that way of like of an equator, and what the equator is to like the operator being 0 or Zion in a way of the 1,000 years of peace, or you know biblical reference that way, or the separation between church and state that way with the color code of the United States codes annotated, and what that is to you know the United States Treasury and the Grover Cleveland thing, the U.S. $1,000 bill and $1,000 in any case, yeah. So yeah. So I mean, there was like a lot going on in my mind about you know a lot of you know think about the equator and the 0 and the 0 and the exponential quotient that way as compared to the pi r squared. But anyways, like the Apple iPhone 6 seemed to be you know something of a you know the demanded standard of a PhD. You know, like I say, I'm not real sure if it's like limited to you know medical profession. Maybe so. In any case, I guess when I know, I'll know. But anyway, yeah. So anyway, and then the 6-year period of like 1995 to the year 2001 seemed to be the deal of you know the terms in office of like Williams, Jefferson, Clinton. Okay. And in any case, yeah. So there was a lot going on. It seemed to be like a real big deal about what was going on. In and out, you know, between like 1993 to like 1999, and big changes in what looked to be involving importing and exporting in that way, of international banking systems of importing and exporting, and obviously you know my thought of not limited to maritime law, but pretty much a major factor of what that is to the United States or distribution worldwide. But anyway, yeah. So it seemed to be like at the end of William Jefferson Clinton and Al Gore in office, it seemed to be like you know the transition into the George Bush administration, and it going on you know that way. So yeah, so I was like looking at that because you know what the 6-year period is to you know the heart, or you know what the deal is with even yeah the delta force in a triangle, or what that is to you know deep star 6 or the pi r squared, and you know the 6-point star instead of the 3-point. Anyway, it's kind of like I'm getting off. It's already like 10:45 right now. In any case, yeah. So I wanted to mention that because I'm going to have to take a quick break here pretty soon anyway. But I wanted to mention the Apple iPhone 6s because the software. I mean, it looks. I'm not real sure in any way if Apple iPhone 6. I'm assuming that it's in a chronological order, that it didn't really. I mean, based upon, I don't even know how old the Apple iPhone 6 really is. Although the software looks like the Apple iPhone SE, and a big deal about the year of 2020. And like I say, you know, Barbara Walters and Hugh Downs being thing about the, you know, a lot of what seems to be now of significance in the way of alphanumerics and you know vision, or is the perfect 10-10 vision in the way of you know going through a night vision or an administration that way of you know I don't know if I would even include shadow government as night vision. I mean, you know, really, I mean, I don't know if I really would at all. Or, you know, why a U.S. patent is not a copyright in that way, or, you know, why the Fifth Amendment is not a nonprofit organization, or why cryptocurrency is not, you know, Bitcoin is not cryptocurrency. I mean, really, the list goes on kind of like that way. And that's why I'm saying, something about, President Abraham Lincoln and the thing about studying dark and night vision that way. If it's a point of origin, getting, from the penny to the presidential administration, and what Abraham is, I mean, if it's like Vic's formula 44 and the syllable of Abraham being 22 and 22, or V and V being, 22 and 22 is like 44, or, including even the W would be 44 and 67. And a little bit of a combination, using the 55 thing. And what M is in is that way alphanumerics of 55 in the sky and heaven and all that stuff about, intelligence and the telepathic phase, or the opposite thing, or, the Pentagon Reserve reverse, or, what the deal is about the M is in that way of 55. And in my mind, ultimately, the heaven thing of alphanumerics in the sky, the list goes on and with biblical reference and terminology that way, and not limited to including, political science, pretty much so. And it seems to be like a big deal of that way, with what degree level really is to whether if the word is really opportunity, or the equator issue about the relation, pronunciation, and spelling of relation between 90 and 94 that way, ultimately getting to a lot of factors involving, in my mind, the Roe v. Wade thing. And what that is to annotation or annotated, or abortion, adoption, or the list goes on quite a bit about the Y2K actually equaling 94, and what the Y is to the 25th letter, and 2 being spelled out being TWO and 58, and the K being 11. It's like 94, okay. And Y2K, and meeting the thing about the new millennium, the year 2000, and being something, in my mind, even of Nostradamus, it's kind of like something about Nostradamus with Orson Welles narrating it, that ultimately got to the 400-year period of accuracy of predictions that way. And ultimately resulting in the prediction that the year 2012 had been designated by experts as being, what Nostradamus was referring to, that way of the year 2012. And in my mind, it seems to be, the exact opposite of like the 2012 and the beginning of like the, 21, 22, and 23, this year being the year 2023. I mean, it seems to be so much about something about memory, minus the fact of being 35, and, Austin Powers blue bonnet, Imperial Eagle that way of like Geneva, Switzerland, and what that is to, business and corporate law, or beyond, what would be maybe presented in the idea of like the ERISA statute being 52, likewise, in addition to what 6 is, alphanumerically being 52, and what the ERISA statute and the VPN is to night vision, or whether or not if shadow government and night vision is really only the appearance of maybe what would maybe presumed as togetherness, or within range kind of like thing of participation that way. But the thing with this is like whether or not if a VPN is a via plenipotentiary network, or a vice president network, or just an acronym of whether in or out of circuit, or participating or not in a circuit is really the issue or not, or what a degree level is, and if only opportunity is a manufactured geographic option below business and corporate law, or what having fair use as international law as an access easement is to proper English numerical composition, or what that is to what would be maybe considered royalties in one way of how I would possibly define what the mayor's office means to like business law itself, or proclamations and declarations, or what ratifying and codifying is or is not. In that way of like the COVID ID 19, the COVID ID, and it seemed to be like really the big deal on absolute Christianity level of like a Sarbanes and Oxley, financial instruments and SOX compliance, and what would be termed as, auditing legal media and deposition, like the 3 methods, whether it's the same as the 3 methods of simple addition, computating the symbolic representation in between the C and a PTIS, being 58 of the symbolic representation, is in my mind, not necessarily, totally out of my mind, but yeah, something about the airborne thing of like a mental alphanumerics of like mental telepathy, mine is God being Holy Spirit and 6 surface and Jesus Christ and all that stuff. But the thing with this is that really, once again, it seems to be like getting to whether or not if the 6 is going to be, spelled out in a way alphanumerically being 52, or or what that is to a VPN, or even the ERISA statute. And it seems to be the significance of the acronym really being whether or not if a degreed or non-degreed issue is really, the degree level, and what opportunity maybe might only represent to degreed or non-degreed in that way. Or what having fair use of international law as a intellectual easement, having fair use of what would even represent maybe a neighborhood, or what a fixture in real estate is based upon what a fixture is, whether it's defining a projected estimate of how property or what a living quarter is or is not, or if livestock is really the issue of some factor of management, or what that is to even a baptism seems to be like more and more like really the big deal about the maritime law that way beyond the front lines of the beachfront, and sand software and the color code, the beachfront itself, and what that is to the value of like COVID ID 19 being 72, or money, or brown that way, and really what that is to the Star of David, the DAVID, the David, the DAVID, or the COVID ID. And if it's 19, I mean, ultimately it seems to be like the deal about a code between the DA and the CO, a code that way, which is the 4, and the VID, what is that, 22, 21, 25, I have to think about that, 22, 31, 35, it's like 35, and it's like, in my mind, I've been looking at the memory minus de facto being 35, and what that is too, like Austin Powers, or Austin being 84 in Embassy, or Embassy Powers, or Austin Powers, a Blue Bonnet, Imperial Eagle thing, and what that is too, like Geneva, Switzerland, in a way of like human civil rights, or human capital of investment terminology, or storage area networks of an acronym of sand software, or what that is to a degree level of like securities and annuities that way, or what human civil rights is in Geneva, Switzerland. And there's the thing about the BN venue, Geneva, Switzerland, and the location, likewise the place of like the summit meetings with all the flags, and those two are like given as information. It's like one and the same, or a duration, like when it's going on, it's like those are like the two mandatory of participating factors that way. I mean, if it's really true, how true it is, it's just something of whether or not if the available information is a duration of intellectual, or what is being made available, and thoroughly based upon memory, what would normally not even have any significance unless, memory was like considered maybe a factor. In any case, so like thinking about something like that involving, whether or not if a daily standard transaction in the bank reflecting maybe what endorsement is as compared to a direct deposit, or any combination retroactively, what that is, and circuit claiming that, the degree never really ever had to maybe identify attaching any reality to what a name and identity is, to what would normally be geographically assumed to be, the issue. And if that's only the issue of like opportunity identifying maybe a limitation based upon a value accomplishing whether if they've earned the freedom or the annuity in the way of like travel, or not restricted by description of participation that would normally represent maybe what employment is, or maybe a degree level of what associate is as compared to that's sometimes I use it not really as sarcasm. I don't mean to demean the value of the degree or the associates, or degrade the meaning of like participation by being the accusation of an employee. What fair use would only mean is that more than likely, many times more so than not, of non-degreed as compared to the degreed issue, and whether or not if non-negotiable, non-transferable itemization is specifically all about that in terminology in real estate, ultimately getting to what a neighborhood is or is not, or whether or not when and where, and who really is going to like be the factor of whether if annotation is a factor of like enforcement, or like really not at all, or maybe so, or what that is based upon auditing in a way of like auditing what a constant in circuit would be, as a capacitor would provide a constant as a rating, as a designation of like what value of like what's in circuit itself, as a set standard. Not that all circuits are the same of set standards, or a deviant, but a capacitor is like, thoroughly manufactured that way to be that of circuit, and it's kind of like, what that is to intellectual property or human capital or human civil rights going through a circuit, beyond business and corporate law that way, going through, the taxation and itemization, going through the circuit in that way of like military time and getting straight into the expenditures of, the real deal about, the aggregates of like, M1, M2, and M3 of like monetary, domestic, and gross national product that way of international banking systems. And what all that is in circuit for real. So like I have like spent like years like thinking about a lot of stuff that like I was like really getting into like looking at that way. And it's already going on 35 minutes and 31 seconds right now. But anyway, yeah. So I was kind of like really focusing my attention that way because the only thing is that lots have been going on right here. And normally I would be making music videos, and I really started what I really practiced my entire life on my drums, really I would include singing, but there seems to be like an issue that really, if it's really, just an environmental issue or, what a singer or like an entire record company might go totally like, that's not funny kind of crap, presenting, a manufactured environmental issue. So it's like really not, I'm really, trying to like, maintain like a real, not that I have to be cool about it at all, okay? But anyway, yeah. So anyway, so like I'm lots been going on, kind of like, you got to be kidding me. Anyway, so like in any case, so it's kind of like looking at that in a way, not necessarily humor, what control only is, but I don't know if it's like a prejudice in a way what entertainment only means to programming, or what that is in networking, or what internet protocol. What the hell for real, all that happens and stuff, and I want to maintain my vocabulary for like a kind of like, go beyond, some like, monotone kind of like, yeah, so it's like really not cool, losing it in that way, thinking that, you got to be kidding me. So anyway, if it's ultimately really identifying an entire television network, or being misbelieved what public television might not really ever be seen as the KU band, it seems to be like the big deal about the KU band being identified in VSAT technology. If that really represents maybe what public television is to maybe a VPN, or a degree level of maybe something less than like Grover Cleveland, the U.S. $1,000 being 1,000, and the Zion thing, or when and where, what separation between church and state is, in the way of Zion. It seems to be the big deal about Geneva, Switzerland, and human capital and human civil rights that way, what seemed to be would almost be a demanded requirement. Really, really at that level. If that's as nice as it gets, that's some real serious, not funny crap, okay? But anyway, if that's what the deal is, for real, about a circuit, okay? In any case, yeah. So like I've been thinking about a lot about what's been involved with like memory, because when I realized the memory was like a factor that the significance of like remembering was like not even a question, and it seemed to be like the deal, about the memory minus de facto being 35, and something about Austin Powers, or what that is to NASA or space exploration or color code of night vision, and what shadow government is or is not, going through a circuit that way, and all that stuff. So anyway, I was kind of basing a lot on that because there had been information that only when and where going through it, even before what it means before, during, and after going through a circuit. Some of the information when I really got serious about studying Alpha-American linguistics, and bibliography and geographics and Alpha-American geographic attachment and analytical and all that practical application of principle and all that stuff, and combining it with principles like exponential quotients and Wyatt Earp and the four purple mountains majesty and the P is silent in purple and the Earp pronunciation, the ERP exclusionary rule provision, what that is to Wyatt Earp and John Wayne and Hop saying about a baptism beyond paying for gold. The delta force in the triangle, what the pyramid is to the US dollar that way, or some symbolic representation and schematics that way, the big mouth of the river, of the delta, and what that is to electronic power in Houston, Texas, and William International in alphanumerics of like 181, or what the 100 Club is, about the 64 and 36 being the big deal. The only two big significant thing about, alphanumeric equations being of 64 being used, equating to 181 Houston, Texas, Electronic Power, and WadeASV International are the three big ones right now. Selective Service, I'm not really real sure really what's all involved with Selective Service. And my thing about Sarbanes and Oxley seems to be whether or not if financial instruments and SOX compliance, I mean, if SOX compliance is representative of the X being, wrong, or money itself, I mean, if it's really representing both sides of what would be normally automatically my thought of like SOX compliance, of the way it's spelled, like, the White Sox or Red Sox, like automatically the baseball thing, okay, of the red and white, two of the colors of the United States, flag, the Red Sox and the White Sox, and what 90 degrees to a baseball field, ultimately getting to, some value of the infinite lines, that way of infinity, and what that is to the zoom lens, and really a symmetrical issue like a, pi r squared, what squared really is to a 90-degree right angle, or asymmetrical in that way, that would present maybe, the full 360 in a way of a square, not necessarily a circle, although the pi r squared is about a circle on a flat plane surface. They're using a radius as an approximation with 3.1416 to get the actual diameter that way of a circle. Ultimately getting to the pi r squared, volume. The thing about, the isometrics of actual participation, of three-dimensional, of like actual participation, it's almost like a signature and endorsement of the bank. It's kind of like a defector, like not even knowing that hey, there's more to it than just like, signing, going in and out of the bank. But, most of the people that are inside of the bank anyway, it's like demanding participation, in that way, requiring, time designated within description of what they're even in the bank for to begin with, and don't know any difference of what it still even means to be in the bank, and leaving the bank, and it's like not exactly the easiest thing in the world when the situation has really been in control, far beyond maybe the majority might ever not even realize, I mean, for real. And what that is to, like, SSI, it seems to be like, my situation right now with the acronym of SSI, Supplemental Security Income, is to the ISS, or, the about face thing of intelligence, or, a telepathic face, or, what that is to the exact opposite, or Pentagon Reserve Reverse deal of like ISS, the International Space Station, is a supplemental security or Secret Service intelligence of the acronym, or some superstar, investment, of the acronym of SSI. I mean, for real. And the Stars Born thing about, being, beyond like maritime law of liquid equity, beyond the front lines of the beachfront, I mean, of a baptism, I mean, for real, and what J. Edgar Hoover means to the amphibious thing, really implying that in that way. Not limited to, but also including the symbolic representation on the backside of the US $1 bill, in my mind, of the, the telepathic mediation in the sky thing about it, for real. And what that is to airborne, the Air Force, getting into the space exploration, the real deal about the Stars Born thing, okay. Well, anyway, yeah, so, I've been, like, studying a whole lot about that, really. I mean, really, I would be, like, making a lot of music videos, really beyond what I normally like listening to, just like throwing in a compact disc, what was then a lot of cassettes. Now compact disc and MP3, I'm trying to, like, thoroughly convert completely to MP3 format and MP4 format of, it's, hopefully the iPod will still always be available, the classic 160 gigabyte. But yeah, it seemed to be like still like the best really available, really. But I'm fixing to get another one anyway. But anyway, yeah, so like I really want to convert to all that, because I mean it's like a huge space saver, and get everything converted, to where I don't have to, like, stacks and stacks of, like, hundreds, if not thousands of, like, compact discs, what it's been over a period of years. But anyways, like, when I started, like, making my music videos using everything that I use as a standard for myself as a drummer and singer, hadn't really focused. I mean, I sing all the time, but, playing my drums in a progressive way, I hadn't worried about it yet. I mean, I had the wireless microphone set up and all that, and put quite a bit of money into it for a while, but, it seems to be, like, really, I mean, is it really the deal of, like, WadeASV International, if it's really the degree level of what opportunity, I mean, if the word is really opportunity, and what degree, 9 degree it is to opportunity, or what it is to the equator, ultimately getting to the operator being either Chevrolet or a bicentennial deal, or what operator is to the alphanumerics of 108, or 0 being, the thing about the operator, or, HTTP of : the humor a little bit about the // Clash of the Titans, or Nightmares in a way of, like, something about the Houston Oilers moving to the Tennessee Titans, and, the HTTP : Clash of the Titans thing, and a little bit of humor about that. But yeah, anyway, so yeah. So anyway, so there's a little bit of humor about that. Yeah. So anyway, so it seemed to be like the big deal of what Zion is in that way of the zero of the operator and the equator, and like I'm really like putting a little bit of time with the exponential quotient, what would normally be presented in placement of what would be normally identified as a degree of 0 degrees being the equator, and that as compared to Celsius and Fahrenheit that way, or what that placement of the degree normally is when the exponential quotient is a variable of powers of multiplication, as compared it being not identified that way of variables as compared to like the pi r squared, and the 2 being placed where the degree would normally be placed, yet the radius being an automatic thing identified as a square, or what symmetrical asymmetrical is to the 90-degree right angle of infinity, the lines that way, and what that is to the figure 8 and the zoom lens and perfect 10-10 vision. I mean, even in the planetarium and space exploration of astrology, I mean, for real, and what that is on what those infinite lines mean in night vision, or really seeing the light for real. In any case, yeah. So like I'm looking and going a lot on my memory that way. But I'm spending quite a bit of time right now. I actually talking a little bit more than I'd really planned on right now. But yeah, like I'm looking at a lot of, because I wanted to mention the Apple iPhone 6 that way. Being alphanumeric, so 6 being 52, and as it being ultimately getting to 71 in Pearland, the Apple iPhone 6s and 6s being like 71 in Pearland. Okay, I live in Pearland, Texas. Okay, and what that is to California, or and the here's the deal about the bicentennial quarter, okay, and the 200-year celebration of America, plenipotentiary, and the transportation of Lord Jesus Christ, and all that stuff about alphanumerics of 200, and even of maritime law, protected waters around the United States. And if it's still 200, I'm really not sure. I mean, it's a new millennium going on to the 300 thing about the tricentennial, if not, already. I mean, this is the year 2023 anyway. And I don't know if it's the same protected waters around the United States, or if it has, or if it's going to increase to 300 just for the simple fact of it doing it over a tricentennial issue, like the bicentennial quarter in my mind is. And if that's going to be an alphanumeric thing included in publications of the King James Version Bible, if not including, the Book of Mormon, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and other issues that way, and the American Amplified Living Bible, because, yes, I've been to a summit meeting, yeah. Yeah, I've been to a summit. I've been to AA, American Amplified, yeah. Yeah, so anyway, yeah, it goes on and all about the humor about, is it election year, is it the pi r squared volume you're looking for, yeah. The absentee voting, yeah. Yeah, so anyway, yeah, so all that good stuff, a little bit of humor about that, but yeah, I'm not going to stay on that for right now. And I might focus on the humor maybe later. I'm really not going to say right now, just maybe a little hint about it. But anyway, yeah. So anyway, I was thinking about that with the deal about the Roosevelt New Deal Act as compared to the bicentennial quarter, with the drummer on the backside, as compared to the Roosevelt New Deal Act, and involving the FDIC and what that is to Fred Flintstone. I mean, for real, and what the cartoon is to RCA, the Radio Corporation of America, or the CAR being 22, or the FDIC, or the UA, and the word attenuation. And what attenuation is in signal processing, in a way of like going beyond teleprompting, what teleprompting is, and measuring cycles per second in oscillation, like if I'm not mistaken, the 13-band graphic equalizer. I'm not real sure about the 31, and I'm not really going to focus on the 31 graphic band equalizer, although it is the exact opposite of 13. But the thing with this is that what I really know about the 13-band graphic equalizer is that the pastel nanoluminance of the pastel green and the pastel red are the two colors of the 13-band graphic equalizer that are measured in nanounits. My thing about Mork from Ork and Mork and Mindy and Robin Williams and Pam Dauber, the egg, and the Mugu Gai Pan, like, Hop Sing. And the thing about the V-twin thermocouple semiconductor thing about the shots about 9090 thing, I mean, it seems to be, so much about the conductor as compared to the semiconductor. When it's like an anatomy in a way of like a peripheral tolerance of panoramic academia that goes beyond, into the ambidextrous full range of 180 degree of panoramic academia that way, like a V-twin figure 8 drumstick twirl of a drummer, And what that is, going beyond, calculus and depending on that way of waveform, what a conductor, likewise in addition, even the V-twin figure eight, drumstick twirl, representing the figure eight, which ultimately, really gets to, really that, and what that is to Richard Nixon and night vision, and Abraham Lincoln, as compared to what that is in pastel nano luminance that way, or what the egg is to Morgan Mindy. In my mind, the shot about 909 being the V-twin thing, about knowing that it's really an ambidextrous thing of anatomy, and there's like more to it, a panoramic academia, an automatic 180-degree thing of waveform, of conductivity, of symphonic, of waveform representative that way. Likewise with a drummer, it's ultimately getting to the 90-degree right angle, which ultimately gets to the symmetrical, asymmetrical factors of what pi r squared is. For real, as compared to the exponential quotient of variables that are not necessarily identified, although knowing that it's powers of multiplication as compared to the pi r squared, knowing that it's addition, and it is identified that way. And what the infinite lines of, once again, the 90-degree right angle is, that way of perfect 10-10 vision, that way of the zoom lens and the figure eight, what that is to infinity for real. And so anyway, there's just a lot like I'm looking at, and I'm finding, my interest, because I really get into the alphanumerics linguistics and practical application that way. And there's a lot going on, and really I'd like to focus my attention on my own original music. But anyway, yeah. So really, hopefully, I'll get beyond having the need of if it's the tolerance of hey, really there's more to do than being the thought of perception of limitations or restrictions in the way of what whether or not economic factors of manufacturing geographic options have only been the idea of like political science, or what embargo and boycott is to like importing and exporting, or what that is in religion in a way of like, you got to be kidding me, of ratifying and codifying, or what it is in mayor's office of like proclamations, declarations, or like legal media depositions, or what that is a capacitor in circuit. Maintaining some like auditing thing about Sarbanes and Oxley in my mind about financial instruments and stock compliance. And the thing of it is like I hadn't ever been told like really had any real academic other than how could it not be that of the experience. Like for real at this point, I've put years of like studying virtually everything that getting over the naivety of the accusation of knowing or not knowing, of participation, and getting over the naivety of not being involved, kind of reality about hey, I'm looking at it, it's like I have a television in my home, okay. You got to be kidding me. Ignoring it now would be ridiculously not knowing the difference between what a residential area is as compared to a commercial venue of a living quarter, as compared to maybe what that is to the Bureau of Vital Statistics, or importing and exporting in the way of like segregation in a way of like what degree level is based upon degree level, or whether or not if civil rights is really the issue, of whether discrimination is only maybe considered, if discrimination is only what opportunity might only mean as a maybe what having fair use of information only means is only representative of intellectual value, of duration, of what lifespan might only mean based upon given whether if opportunity equates to value of participation, or what discrimination is or is not, or if it's really a civil rights issue, if discrimination is the only thing about civil rights. If it is or is not, is that the comparable ideology of like why a U.S. patent is not copyright, or what human capital is as compared to human civil rights. It seems to be like a real big deal about Geneva, Switzerland, going through a circuit, and what that really is as a capacitor in circuit, maintaining a constant. If any reality involving like networking involving like the barometric altimeter condescending residuals seems to be the real big deal about the isometric, the barometric, the metric thing about the endorsements, signatures, and what participation is, or maybe through the accusation of neglect based upon lack of experience, or maybe not identifying, maybe what maybe should be, or managing factors that anyone might not be aware of doing it on, and experiencing a result based upon another decision that wasn't even acknowledged, or the awareness of any participation and didn't even really know anything about it. It's just like happening. It's like ignored. It's like, what's going on? It's not even thought of like what's going on. It's kind of like, you got to be kidding me. And it's just like accepted as like a neglect, a lack of experience. You got to be kidding me. What do you mean? What's going on? But anyway, yeah. Like I'm trying to get my bowl of Campbell's alphabet soup aligned with like Camp David, okay? And what that is to Kobe ID 19. Yeah, Kobe ID 19. The Camp David, the David. And the Kobe ID, and what that is to what is that? Once again, it's a 35 thing, isn't it? A code of like whether if that's going to be the human capital of Austin, or NASA, or what that is to yeah, that way, or even Dodge, and what Dodge is to like RAM. And once again, it seems to be like whether or not if the random access memory or the read-only memory is the big deal about AOL. And the A and O, once again, of America Online, and what that is to the bank, and the alphanumerics of 28, or air, and what airborne is to the Air Force, that way of like read-only, and what that is to like auditing of Sarbanes and Oxley, financial instruments of SOX compliance. I mean, what the auditing is to AOL, or RAM or ROM, or what AOL is as the alphanumeric value of like 28 in the bank and air. And once again, it seems to be like seriously getting to the J. Edgar Hoover thing about being amphibious, or even the book of Leviticus suggesting levitation, or some accusation that would even suggest anything other than itemization on a tax form of a levy that would even suggest not really what a mechanic's lien might even suggest of a promissory notes, what promissory notes is, or a fixture in real estate being used, a medical power of attorney being used as a fixture in real estate, as a HOA as a deed restriction, or GMAC as a promissory note, or the International Electrical Electronic Engineering, the IEEE, all being 24 about it, and what that is standardization. I mean, if it's ultimately getting to the same thing what a fixture is in real estate of a neighborhood being residential, or the barometric, balloon, or the book cover. I mean, it seems to be, the real deal, and the whole entire issue of the cover of like the Psychic War, America's Foremost Psychic Spy, and the cover of the CIA's top secret Stargate program. I mean, it's ultimately getting to the cover, and what really looks like, the baptism beyond maritime law, including, networking phrases and terminology like a barometric altimeter of condensing residuals, seemingly the ultimate requirements of a rainbow, and severally, and the practical application of a rainbow of even nanoluminance of like the colors that a diamond project, of the same nanoluminance that more than likely can be actually measured as nanounits of even a rainbow itself. That way of like Chevrolet geoprism is geoprism, and what 109 is. 109 is 110, the alphanumerics of 247, excuse me, and what that is to a Robert E. Rubin quarter. And the Roosevelt New Deal Act, I was getting on it and I kind of like skipped it. The Roosevelt New Deal Act, there's like two presidents identified as Roosevelt, yet Roosevelt, like the power squared, would be like 131, and 131 being like 262, and a 200-year celebration of America, and what a bicentennial quarter is of the 200. I was like, Roosevelt, power squared being twice, being 262, and the plenipotentiary Lord Jesus Christ in transportation, and what 200 is that way. Even a bicentennial quarter representing that, involving, the Roosevelt, the New Deal Act, and what a precedent on the U.S. dollar is, and like a telepathic dollar thing about the quarter, a telepathic quarter dollar, including, the hardware, like what a coin would be, the quarter, as compared to what would maybe be the paper-made thing of 56 is 10, a real big deal, ultimately getting to the spelling, pronunciation, alphanumerics of ultimately getting to 94 annotated in the way of like a adoption, abortion, or what that is really in Y2K, Y being the 25th letter, and the number 2 being spelled out TWO being 58, and the K11 being like 94. What that is to the new millennium, and what 23 is to like Dr. Pepper, and a major 23-year celebration, a 23-year anniversary celebration of Dr. Pepper, as well as the 23 ingredients, ultimately getting to the absolute values like of 23 and 23 being 46 and algebra and music century. I mean, like, I'm really getting into like all that stuff. I mean, for real. I mean, and making some real comprehensible stuff. I mean, it's like such a huge amount of available information, but I mean, it's like so for real, comprehendibly. I mean, that's really what I like really look at and study that way. A lot about alphanumerics linguistics that way. And the thing of it is that the Roosevelt New Deal Act, when it gets to the New Deal being 64, or Zion, or HTTP, and the colon double forward slash, or the American in Israel, about the 6-point star, or the Deep Star 6, and what that is to night vision, Abraham Lincoln, and ultimately getting to the V twin of like Richard Nixon, and what that is to a drummer as compared to the waveform of a conductor of like a symphonic orchestrated magistration. I mean, going beyond measuring cycles per second and oscillation, that way of frequency and bandwidth, as compared to getting to customized waveform in signal processing, not necessarily cycles per second, measuring cycles per second and oscillation, frequency of spectrum and bandwidth. Normally it's just verbal or what's available, not manufacturing anything beyond what I see as the limit of the United States Supreme Court. Not anything other than its original perception, and maybe the 13-band graphic equalizer being its limitation of maybe adjusting a little bit about the quality within a demanded requirement of the United States Supreme Court. That's the way I see teleprompting really being that way about the 13 colonies of American history, or what that is to 13 itself being 99, and all that telepathic stuff about the pronunciation of telepathy being the TP in 36, and what that is to night vision and oil and chase, and even a feet thing about the cartoon and Fred Flintstone, and hey, once again, life's the same, moving in stereo, life's the same except for Fred Flintstone's shoes. And I mean, for real, about that pi r squared volume, and what that is to the cylindrical thing as compared to the telekinetics of like the rolling of the pen, and what papermate pen is to like chase ink, or maybe the skipping of what telekinetic might only suggest to the difference between Lincoln being the kennel or the colonel, as compared to country and county, and the R issue applied to what Lincoln is to a kennel, or as American as hot dogs and apple pie, and what apple, it seems to be the apple pie being the deal about the 30, and 30 being spelled out alphanumerically as 100, like the quarter. I mean, it's like all the connectivity is like really there, using night vision, what that is to the rectangle, and Lincoln Continental that way, of the vertical rectangle of like the field scope and range of law of night vision, and then 90-degree right angle of the 1992 map, representing rectangles like all over the entire United States. The one and only year that I know of that it's done that. Likewise, in addition, 1992 being like the spelling of Novus Ordo Seclorum having 2 U2, as compared to I mean, I never even noticed the difference, but it was only because of a certain factor of religious participation that really resulted in what I've been really ultimately going since like June 14, 1992. A Flag Day thing, a SAT thing, that really seems to be the thing about the Flag Day of 1992, June 14th, and ultimately getting to the Flag Day thing about yeah, for real, and it seemed to be like the SAT of the 2400 thing about the military time and highest possible score that way. So like I'm looking at like what it means to like what my thought of making my own grade is to experiencing like just like being here like right now, everything like on this planet and this globe beyond my toilet, right, and some some real deal about some domicile globalization beyond international financial management of borrowers terminology. But anyway, great. Okay, it's like going on a little bit more than an hour here and 4 minutes, and yay, 24 seconds. Yeah, so I think I'm gonna take a break right here and maybe trying to, when I get started, I try to stay focused in direction of my concentrated in the content in the direction. But there's like so much like on my mind about like everything like you just heard. It's kind of like it's unreal, and yeah, I spent a lot of time thinking about it because I put many years in looking at it and studying it that way. Which ultimately started beginning only alphanumerics, and then when I realized, that alphanumerics and that Pentagon Reserve Reverse and intelligence opposite and the telepathic phase thing and all that stuff about, M is in, and the 55 thing about the sky and heaven and when it's reversed, the M is in and then the N is M, 13 is 14, 14 is 13, being the 55 thing about the alphanumerics, right? Well, anyway, so like when I started with like alphanumerics and I realized that about the alphabet, then I started studying analytically as well as like linguistically a practical application with principle that way, progressively getting more experience learning how to study that way. Because I mean, I study now in a way like I've never, but I really, really like getting into it that way now because I mean, I grasp so much more and retain so very much more information now studying. It's not so burdening of like mental anguish trying to, really, you've heard it like cramming, about like trying to grasp as much information as possible. But over a period of years, as compared to maybe isolating what might even involve a degree plan, the concentration, the time amount required. I mean, it's not normal. I mean, it's sometimes it gets really really stressful, like mental anguish. But like now, it's kind of like after years of like studying the alphanumerics and linguistics and practical application, I mean, I grasp so very much more, so much very quicker, and it's not so like burdening in that way based upon the way I study. And it's like it's very very interesting to me that way, and I like putting that thought, in some original, I'm not sure if I'll use the word lyrics, but, as far as like my words and audio production with like I don't know if I would say I'm going to limit the thought of like a Christian progressive hard rock, but, I'd like to cover it all with the Christian progressive heavy metal hard pop rock. I mean, I want to include all that in that way. Not limited to the Christian thing about it, based upon what I've referred to as the separation between church and state that way, and only the degree thing about it, and the Christian science of that, going beyond, just like sitting in church for like a couple of hours, 2 or 3 hours, like on a Sunday, or if there's an option of, the Seventh Day Adventist thing on a Saturday. I mean, I put like, it's like, I'm going to say this real quick before, it's like already an hour and 7 minutes right now, but like, my parents like, it was like almost a demanded requirement for me to go to church, okay? And, being like really young, it's kind of like, you got to be kidding me, it's the weekend, I got to ride my bike and jog and go to the beach and all that stuff, but anyway, and really, I mean, really, I've mentioned this before, like my mother like knew it more than anyone I had heard in church or even on television at the time. But, her idea, and really after my mother passed away, I mean, I really got even more into the Christian, not necessarily the thought of religion, but the Christianity in a way, and a whole new different perspective when like alphanumerics and linguistics, I started looking at Christianity and the religion that way. I mean, I looked at it a whole different idea as compared to what I was taught. I mean, really, but anyway, it's because really, really, the thing with this is that my interest in Christianity grew far beyond my own expectations. I mean, far beyond. It wasn't that I was even expecting it. I mean, for real. It was just happening. It seemed to be like a mandatory requirement that really I just couldn't ignore. I mean, that way involving alphanumerics and linguistics that way. And it's like it really became like very interesting beyond, what might be, hey, it's the weekend, I got to go play, And, my thought of academics that way involving, the Christian religion that way as compared to, just going there for like some social ideology of like just being there, what it's supposed to mean anyway. But yeah, what it really is now as compared to what it was supposed to mean then, really did mean what it was supposed to mean, but really kind of extremely lax, yet I was there. And actually I learned more really than I really had even realized really. And it's significant, very much so now. That was, significant, although I was like really getting into it. And didn't even realize it, that the significance of the insignificance of like really not using it has like really been a huge major help like right now. So anyway, I look at it that way, and I just wanted to say that much about it right now because anyway, it's going on like an hour and 9 minutes, going on an hour and 10 minutes here pretty soon, a couple seconds. But anyway, I'm going to take a break because, yeah, I need to anyway. So anyway, like, there it is. Okay, talk to you later.